When you look at statistically what's happening with the increase in things like anxiety or this feeling of like self-isolation and loneliness, purposelessness, addiction or dependence on some type of medication to remedy just for you to feel normal. You don't even need to feel like great. You just want to be able to get out the door. Well, what's going on? If you're in attunement with nature, you're probably feeling pretty good. But we are so disconnected. The simplest, most foundational thing that any person can possibly do is you are literally augmenting your autonomic nervous system and the distribution of blood and the way you're producing yourself in real time within seconds.
Wow. You've been in the body game for so long. Where is it that you're finding your focus today?
Circulate, sunlight, grounding. Your body has evolved to naturally circulate and pump itself so it doesn't become toxic. We spend most of our time seated, clamping down those waste management systems in the body. Think of sunlight as actually the way that you perceive drinking a bowl of soup. You're actually consuming matter. There's been a ton of data and research around the effect that grounding has on reducing free radicals in the body, because what free radicals are looking for is they're looking for a spare electron. You're continually pouring billions or trillions of free electrons into the body when you just have contact with the earth. Then it gets into, I think, like relationships and purpose and actually feeling like there's a reason that I'm getting up in the morning. Kind of a deeper, like metaphysical aspect of health, but just figuring out like, what are you doing here? Figure out what feels good in alignment for that.
So dude, how long have you been in Austin?
3 years. I've been saying 3 years for the last couple of years. And then I was like, it has to be 4 years because I've been saying 3 years for multiple years.
Yeah.
And now I realize that June will be the 3-year anniversary. So now it's actually finally officially 3 years. But I've literally been saying that for, I think, at least the last couple of years. I'm very confused on time.
Well, I think we all are. Ever since 2020, it's just like...
It's all blur.
It's all a blur.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that kind of what was happening in this state of the world was inspired the move to Austin?
Yeah, I was thinking about moving to Austin mainly because of On It and Aubrey and that whole sphere for the last 6 years or so. And then the whole world suddenly was moving to On It all at the same time.
Yeah.
And just the whole vid situation in LA was pretty annoying. Mm-hmm. I just found it annoying. Is a big thing. Like people really caring about each other's business and what they're doing and all that stuff. I just didn't care to care about what somebody else was doing with their health and physiology. And at one point, my brother and I, we were out for a run down Broadway Street in Venice. And this fella was walking his dog. He had a bag of poop and he decided to huck said bag of poop. And it hit my brother in the side of the neck because he was so mad that we weren't wearing masks. So, it's I think it's time to go.
Oh my God, dude.
He was pissed.
How did your brother react?
We were very confused.
Yeah.
It was and he wasn't he was 50 years old and just curmudgeon-y and not happy about life and whatnot. It didn't seem like something to engage in, physical altercation over. It was kind of just wow, how did that happen?
Does your brother still live there?
He's in LA, yeah.
Yeah. Has he thought about moving?
I think so. He's a really amazing linguist. He's a poet and does writing and things of the sort. And so he's out there. I think LA is his place for a while to do that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does a thing called Poetic LA, and he brings people together. It's a weekly thing where people come and do poetry slams and all that stuff. So he's reviving that part of culture out there, which I think is cool.
Yeah, geez. Do you get back there much?
Every now and again. So I go back there for work, stay in Malibu, which is a little bit more easier than I think Santa Monica. The vibe feels a little bit more easeful. But my feeling of LA, I was describing it to a friend yesterday. When I go back to LA, the way that it feels is it's almost like people are standing atop of the ground. It's you're kind of tiptoeing around LA, but there's always a feeling of am I welcome here? Am I good enough? Who am I with? Do I belong? Yes, there's a little bit more of like an energy in my experience of LA of kind of feeling like it's like not quite home, like, do I belong in this home? And Austin, to me personally, feels a little bit more just easier in that way. It feels more welcoming. Like arriving to the LA airport compared to arriving to the Austin airport is very different experience. Like when I come back to Austin,
your nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah. My nervous system goes exhale when I arrive into Austin, and it's more of like like things get a little tighter when I arrive into Los Angeles. But I have incredible gratitude for Los Angeles. It was very supportive for a lot of like peak experiences, and a lot of opportunities arose from being out there. But I think generally people arrive to Los Angeles to get something. And once they get what they arrived for, probably most people don't, but once they get what they arrived for, it's like time to go. Whereas living in a place that's like has more like just normal people living normal lives, like the Midwest or, Texas has this interesting combination of, it has a lot of the people from the New Yorks and the San Franciscos and the LAs. And it's still just like this, like old town, people are here living simple lives and eating barbecue and don't have any aspirations and moving to Bali or whatever. We're here. Yeah. So there's something very nice about being in a place where people are here, not planning on going anywhere. I think you care about your relationships in that way. It's like a little bit slower paced. It feels good for the nervous system for me.
Yeah, we came here 11 years ago, and I'd say our experience has been.
You're an OG.
I guess so, right? 11
you
years.
founded the great city of Austin, Texas.
I was the one. Peyton and I were the ones.
Peyton, you were the ones.
Yeah. It's been interesting because it's funny. In the last couple of years, I hear from people who don't live here. Oh, a lot of people moving from California, New York, and bringing their politics, and that just hasn't been my experience. I've met a lot of amazing people that have come from there, and I feel like they're drawn here because the politics are different. It's not necessarily political. I guess you could argue that it is in some way, but it's not. People don't necessarily wear it on their sleeve. Yeah. There's allowing people to have their own views, and
environments change people. Like we're always attuning to each other, and so that's like something that typically, like you've heard this with like women menstruating in sync with each other. We'll do that with our heart rates. We'll do that with our respiration. So you'll typically follow like the alpha in the room. So I'm obviously, following, what's the dog's name? Enzo. So we're all kind of syncing up to Enzo right now because Enzo's from some other foreign planet. We're all very curious about his wisdom and power. But you'll sync up your physiology to whoever's kind of like the pack leader. And so I think we also do that when we go to different places. So if you arrive in Bali, people say Bali's has this like loose, feminine, flowing, healing type nature. And then you go to India and it has like this like frenetic, fast type, it's more of like fiery type experience. You go to LA, it has what LA is. You go to New York, like New York's very clear. It's almost like this living, breathing entity of sorts. And it's just city and it's bricks and it's loud and it's like, it's like that kind of energy. Like you get shit done. LA is more feminine than that. It's more like a Bali type situation comparison. And so I think when people arrive, whatever, preset nervous system state you had when you arrived before, and perspectives and ideologies and all that stuff to a place, I think the place will inevitably start to subtly shift you in ways that you might not even realize. So I think the tone of Austin would probably has had effects on those people that maybe came with the intention even to potentially like shift things around and like, okay, I'm going to go with the way that I am. Yeah. But then I think like the land actually has, pretty significant effect on people. That's obviously just like some pseudoscience, but that's like my experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of politics, like, do you have some thoughts on what we're kind of faced with coming up this fall? I know that you've had Marianne Williamson on the podcast a couple of times, and she's recently dropped out.
Yeah,
don't know that they would have done anything for her.
Been too much.
How do you make sense of what's going on?
I don't think it feels, I think it's challenging to be a person that's not deeply integrated within the realm of politics. And it's like actually in Washington, DC, or like actually in that space, to be able to really trust our belief systems. Like I feel like it feels to me like culturally we've been gaslit probably for a very long time. And it's become much more overtly clear recently. And it almost feels like lying is just an accepted part of media. And it's like, oh, it's not, we don't actually, like, we're not being honest. We're biased. Like we're all ideologues of one specific perspective. And so it seems kind of just acceptable that like, oh yeah, like it's a part of the game to not believe what they're saying. They're just saying what they're saying in order to get to whatever, end that they're seeking. And so it's a very confusing time, I think, to be able to hold a strong perspective on actually what's being shared from political views. So I lean more towards people, and, trusting people in power, because ultimately it's like people that are making decisions. And, that's really where like I actually can feel in an embodied way, like confident about things of like, I genuinely trust this person. So most of my political beliefs and perspectives are based off of just actually like the how I feel around or like in listening to the politician. And obviously RFK is like a person that feels very authentic, and someone that I actually, I got to sit in a sweat lodge with him, and as a part of the event they did here in Austin. I was leading a workshop for it, and he's actually a healthy person. Like he actually like cares about the temple of his body, which I think, how you do anything is how you do everything. I think that the person that to me cares about the types of food that they put into their body. They care about the way that they think. They care about the way that they, move their body. They care about others. They listen really deeply. He has an ability to, I don't know if it's ability, just like the way that he's crafted. He like actually listens to people, and I think that I have a lot of admiration for folks in those positions, that they get bombarded by a lot of attention and they're still able to like maintain this energy to be present for people that, they very easily could be like condescending towards, or like, oh, I don't have time for this. But, outside of that, like, who knows what the chances of him moving up in through to actually like become POTUS. I don't know. I don't know enough about politics.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's just, when I think about the options that are available,
that's a sad thing. It's like, it's consistently, it seems like elections are, well, I'm going to vote for this person because that person's just so terrible.
Yes.
That's odd.
So many people are anybody but Trump. And
yeah, it really makes like Biden. Somebody asked, I was having a conversation with somebody last night. Sorry for interrupting you. I was having a conversation with somebody last night, and they're like, just reflect on what, if you were just hiring Biden, if you had some kind of, business, or you were the mayor of some place and you could kind of put people, to their spots, and Biden came in and you were like, okay, like we're going to put you in a position in the town. What would you actually viably be able to, what position could you viably place Biden into? Walmart attendant, like a Walmart greeter was the response that
wow, really like literally short shifts.
Yeah, short shifts, because he's like sweet, he's homey, he loves to sniff kids, he'll like he's very, he's like a special creature. But like literally, if you actually reflect of like, what if you were running the system, where would you place our president of the United States? I think I think he'd be like a super good Walmart greeter.
Dude.
But like not president. You're not going to run the town. No. Even a small town. Like you don't want to run the whole town.
Dude.
Yeah. That's me not knowing anything about politics. It's literally just observing people. I'm just observing people. And that's like the observation, my subjective observation. That's what I've gathered.
Yeah. And it's I think it's astute. I mean, I feel the same way. that's where we're at. And maybe that's the road we need to go down, where the presidential race has just kind of devolved over the last couple of elections into like, what are we doing here? And now there's no way to escape. Like, they're going to roll this guy out. And then you have Trump for all his faults. And any reasonable person spoke to the three of them and asked them questions like, how do you not pick RFK?
Yeah. I mean, Trump would probably it would be a really, really interesting debate to see RFK and Trump.
Yeah.
Because Trump does something that's incredibly effective, which is he does like middle school gossip, and it's so good. And he's able to speak to the level of probably most Americans. Even really smart people like simplicity, and they also like to feel, so RFK has this ability to express feeling in like this really deep, meaningful, like visceral type way. Because I mean, he's like, it's just the history of who he is. Like his bloodline it's incredible. I think there's so much just wisdom within the bloodline of RFK that he's expressing now as this present human that he is. But Trump is engaging in another emotional way that he kind of gets you a little like like he evokes this childish like silliness in a way. It's like he's like, Trump would probably be the most fun person to invite to like a bachelor party or something. If you're going to go golfing with somebody, you probably want to go with Trump.
Yes.
And I think that ultimately, like, that's what politicians are speaking to, is like, who would you want to hang out with for a weekend with the boys? And like, no matter what their political views are, I think like it speaks, even if it's at a subconscious level, it's speaking to something deep within people of like, oh, like, I like that guy. I wish he was my uncle.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Trump is. He's masterful with. He's in my experience, in a little bit of observing him that I have, he's really brilliant with creating rapport very quickly. And he makes people feel very special. Like every person that he's around, it's something that he does is like whatever they're doing is the best thing, and it's so important. And it's like, and when you have the power that somebody like that has, you want to believe what they're saying. I'm not saying that Trump's a liar. I'm not saying, I just don't, I don't know. Yeah. He clearly embellishes all the time, but he embellishes so consistently his like ongoing kind of, fibs. It's just a part of his personality. So it almost feels honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, cool. He's consistently lying in this way almost all the time. So I just have to kind of like repattern a little bit, like turn my knobs a little bit sideways. Yeah. And I'm like, cool, I get it.
Yeah. He is fascinating.
He's fascinating.
And I think you bring up some really good points about him. There's something that is, I don't know if it's endearing about him, but you can connect to what he's doing. And there is so much, there's like that positivity, and also he can be very cutting, and he's very clever.
Yeah. And he's suppressed. He's been silenced and deplatformed, and he's just went through the whole trial thing and all of that. So to me, that actually, I would think for most people paying attention, historically, like the bad guys usually aren't the ones being silenced, in most iterations throughout history. And so for me, it actually has created significant more respect for whatever's going on within that. Like the whole Trump situation, just because it's like, oh wait, before I would have just thought he's an asshole and like an egomaniac, and he's probably got some childhood stuff, and he's like, there's some things happening there.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of like, they're so scared of this guy. Okay, there must be something that I don't actually see, and then it'd be a matter of like unpacking, like, why are they so scared of him? To be able to put that much energy into like, we need to put a muzzle in this man. So to me, my kind of contrarian mind goes towards like, oh, he might be like a lot better than we think he is actually. But that's, again, not understanding politics, just observing like humans.
Yeah, I think that's my inclination too. It's that he's not part of the system that many others are. And so he, I think when he came in, it upset that balance of how they run. I mean, again, like what's happening with Biden? Is he really making any of these decisions?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't think.
Has he spoken on his own in like, I mean, I guess most presidents are just reading off a teleprompter, but like, is there much, do we even get Biden? Like, how much of Biden do we actually get? Like Biden, the man.
I don't know. The only thing I see are when he freezes and he stops and it looks like he pooped himself. And like, that's our president.
Yeah, it's very special.
Anyhow, okay. I'm curious about what you're tracking right now. I mean, you've been in the body game for so long and so steeped in that knowledge and worked with some incredible people. Where is it that you're finding your focus today? And like, where do you want to take it?
Well, I think that, there's a lot of, I think it's the same thing. It's like, if you want new information, look into old books. And I think from the lens of optimizing health and all of that, there's like a mirage of tech that seems way more impressive than what you could garner from, just nature, and doing like the basic, simple, close to free or free things. That being said, I think there is a cool opportunity to blend some tech. So like the last, year was helping with the whole Rogers rehab situation, all that stuff. And so that was a great opportunity for me to go really deep into tech and learning how to, having pretty much like infinite resources to be able to invest in anything that works for expediting tissue healing as fast as humanly possible, or like beyond what would be thought to be humanly possible. And so there's like the foundations of that, which are the things that are absolutely never going to change for, physical health, which is the body needs to circulate well. And so that's something that most people in the world, we spend most of our time seated on chairs. And what's happening with that is you are stagnating your lymphatic system among other systems. And something that's interesting within the lymphatic system is most of the primary waste management systems in your body, i.e. like lymphatic glands, are concentrated in places of movement. So it would be like the back of the knee, the popliteal space, in the inguinal and like the groin area, in the stomach area, up in the neck and the clavicles, armpits, places that naturally would get a lot of pumping because the way that you circulate lymphatic fluid is through muscular contraction. And so your body has evolved for millennia to naturally circulate and pump itself so it doesn't become toxic and backed up. And it's a bit of a bummer that culturally we've shifted into chronically being clamping down those waste management systems in the body. So like the simplest, most foundational thing that any person can possibly do is to start by, taking themselves outside, ideally, because there are a lot of different variables, but just opening up their waste management system. So opening up the lymphatic system. At some point I can show you, there's a guy that I did a podcast with. We've done a few, but recently, called Perry Nicholson, who's like the OG in the world of lymphatic drainage, just health through the lymphatic system. And he has a thing called the Big Six that is a really cool thing. You start off working with opening up the space around the clavicles, because this is the point of lowest pressure in the body. Highest pressure would be like down by the feet and the knees and all that stuff. So you open up this space around the clavicle area, and then you go up the space just below the ears and on the side of the neck. And you go into the armpit area, and then you go into the stomach, and then you go into the groin. And it's just a subtle massage, so you can go in like circular motions or side to side, just like start to bring some heat and some movement into those spaces. Then you can give it a little tap, and then you go down to the back of the knees. And that's a really helpful way to jumpstart your whole lymphatic system. A lot of people are experiencing brain fog, or just feeling kind of like malaise or tiredness, or they might have skin disorders of some sort, and it's because their body literally it's backed up with toxicity to the point that it's starting to express itself on their skin or in their joints, or any random different place. If you're backed up with toxic compounds, like eventually it's going to express out. So circulation is the most important thing. And then, stacking on top of the circulation, which you'll naturally get just from like walking more. From there you run on sunshine, for mitochondrial health and just like cellular function and communication and hormonal health and circadian rhythm and all the different things. Like sun is a really good thing. And it's really confusing when you live in a culture that inherently has fear of the sun, which is like super wild.
Yeah.
And then so people end up putting sunblock on, which, has its advantages. But one of the issues with it is you're blocking out the frequencies that would send the signal to your skin, to your physiology to say like, oh, we got too much sun. So you block those out. You're still getting all those other aspects of the spectrum of light from the sun, but you're not getting the signal saying, hey, you actually got to get out of the sun right now. So you're spraying this crazy, toxic wildness on yourself, and it's like pouring like napalm across the beach and everybody smells. It's like, oh, and you're just pouring that onto your body. And then you stay out in the sun for the whole entire day.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were actually had like more like right relationship with the sun and with temperature regulation and all the different things, you would actually be like, oh, we were in the sun for 90 minutes. I'm feeling a little hot. I think I'm going to get out of the sun now. So we bypass that.
Yes.
And so our relationship with the sun, like the main generator and purveyor of energy and life to the entire planet, including humanity, we have this kind of like warped, obscure relationship with. So that would be, like simple things like that. And then like grounding, grounding's like legit. There's been a ton of data and research around the effect of grounding has on reducing inflammation, increasing just like a sense of like well-being. You just feel good when you put your feet on the ground. Yeah. Like the ground, you're continually pouring, billions or trillions of free electrons into the body. When you just put your feet on the ground, your hands on the ground, just have contact with the earth. And those free electrons end up supporting you with reducing free radicals in the body, because what free radicals are looking for is they're looking for a spare electron. And so every time you step your feet onto the ground, you could think of the ground, it's almost like a water fountain, but instead of water, you're getting these free electrons.
Okay.
And so you're pouring that bioelectricity or that electricity into your biology, which ends up, providing balance, homeostasis for the body. There's a lot of things, but I would just say like circulate, sunlight, grounding. Then it gets into, I think, like relationships and purpose and, waking up in the morning and actually feeling like there's a reason that I'm getting up in the morning, like something to look forward to, making life decisions that puts you into a place where you're like, yeah, I want to be here. If you don't want to be here, like it's really hard to have the motivation to exercise and get better food. And you're probably going to be more in a place of kind of like survival and scarcity. And if you're a place of survival and scarcity, you're probably going to eat a lot of, sugar and things that are providing like a quick shot of stimulus to get you to, you just want to be able to get out the door at that point. You're not thinking of like, what's your 1-year plan or your 5-year plan or your 10-year plan. You're just thinking, I'm in a place of kind of panic right now. So you're going to be seeking out the life decisions and the food decisions and the movement decisions that just kind of get you through the day. So I think that that's like a kind of a deeper, like metaphysical aspect of health, but just figuring out like, what are you doing here? Figure out what feels good in alignment for that.
Have you had any periods over the last couple of years where you felt yourself stuck in that? What am I doing?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I feel it now.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. Am I in the right path? My thing is I'm not doing enough. That's my ongoing story.
And is that true, or is it just a story you're telling yourself?
It's both.
Yes.
Yeah. It's totally both. I'm like doing awesome. Like my life is so cool. And I've worked, I could have worked a lot harder. I think like Alan Watts has a bit of like, a really truly smart person doesn't work. Like a truly smart person, if you are kayaking down a river and you're going against the current, you're working. But if you just kind of set yourself up so it's like, oh, we're in the flow of the river, you're moving a lot faster. But it's not necessarily work. It's kind of like, oh, this is rad. You're dodging rapids, and you're having a good time, and you're looking back at your buddies like, did you see that? And you traveled, and then you get there, you're like, well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the person that is, living like the hardcore boss babe life or boss bro life, and they're just like pushing, and they're up early in the morning, and it's like, I work.
Yeah.
They are also moving, but they might be expending a lot more like emotional. It might be a much larger emotional and physiological tax on the mindset of like, I need to work hard. So yeah, that's just a bit on like my perspective of work. So I think probably working a lot harder, and I could be a lot more like in alignment with the river. I probably have a little bit more friction within that. And that's probably my greatest resistance that I have within myself, or like kind of existential concern that I have with myself. Is like, I know that I'm not completely in alignment with the river. Like I know there's parts of like friction in myself and in my life. And I think I can get a little bit like down on myself about that. And that's kind of all a part of my friction. It's like, it's all wrapped up.
Yeah. And because in the past you have, I would guess it's like me, you've had those experiences when you've been completely in flow with the river, and you know what that feels like. And like today, it doesn't quite feel like that. There's some aspects of it.
Yeah, there's parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I think it's like when someone has a feeling of some temporary fleeting sensation of enlightenment, like samadhi or whatever, and it could be sex or some near-death experience or some psychedelic thing or some, you did a Vipassana meditation retreat thing or something that finally clears the static and the chatter out enough for you to actually feel at ease, and like, then like you feel like this sensation of unicity, and, there's not all the attachments to what you think you should be doing and who you think you should be and how you think you should be acting and how much you think you should have and all of that. And you're just like, you're like actually in connection or attunement with nature. If you're in attunement with nature, you're probably feeling pretty good. But we are so disconnected from our relationship with nature, and a part of that's like the whole bioelectric conversation. Like inherently, our bodies are continually attuning to the fields around us. And when you place yourself onto the ground, you're tapping into, a specific like oscillating field of energy, like the Schumann resonance. And when you are in a high rise and you're bombarded by all sorts of non-native electromagnetic frequencies, they don't have this rhythmic type oscillation of frequency. It's one set repetitive frequency. And it kind of sends this signal into your physiology that it's like, oh, it's like you start, it's almost like you have like an immune response to it. Because it feels like there's some threat in your environment. Like this doesn't feel human. This doesn't feel nature. And so just, I think that inherently people are steeped in this invisible world that's affecting our subconscious and our hormonal function and our neurological function in, I think, subtle ways that we probably don't realize. But when you look at statistically what's happening with people from the lens of, maybe increase in things like anxiety or maybe depression or kind of this feeling of like self-isolation and loneliness or purposelessness or addiction or dependence on some type of medication to remedy just for you to feel normal. Like we're just trying to feel normal. We don't even need to feel like great. I'm just trying to feel normal.
Yeah.
And like, so within that, it's like, well, what's going on? It's probably a lot of, it's multifactorial. There's like a lot of variables with that. But I bet you there's some very strong invisible factors happening with that because we have access to all of the medical information that we possibly could have. We know all of the best decisions for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And still there's like this looming thing that seems to be like holding on to culture that's kind of placing us in this path towards getting sicker. It's very, it seems a little confusing, but I feel like there's probably some invisible factors like that. One of them is just like, you just got to take your body outside more often. I think that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah. And I mean, I've noticed you've created an outdoor kind of training space.
I did.
It looks epic.
Yeah,
you've got some cool toys in there, but ultimately you don't need that many toys, right? You just need to be outside and
yeah. But the toys are fun, and the toys. The cool thing with the toys, we're at your place now, and you have all this cool stuff. The cool stuff creates a playful environment, which if you're playful, that's going to be the fastest way. Like Stephen Porges, he created the polyvagal theory. And one of the things that he states in that is one of the fastest ways to jump a person's nervous system into a place of calm and healing and restoration, all that stuff, is cooperative play. So if you're feeling disconnected and despondent and sad and miserable and all the different things, if you can it's why dogs are so like emotional support animal. They embody play. They just want to play with you. So you get a dog or a puppy around a sad person, suddenly like life is actually not that bad. As long as, little Howard, the poodle is around.
Yeah.
I like giving dogs human names. I think that's a good way to do it. But what it's doing to your nervous system is it's causing your body to be like, okay, if I'm safe enough to play and I'm also playing with other people, so I'm a part of the tribe, that means it must mean for, millennia at least, that there's no threat right now. But you're living in a world chronically, and whether it's an illusion or an actual threat, your nervous system is chronically seeking for all the different potential threats, which is super good. It's super wise, because if you miscalculate and you're taking a walk on a trail and you see a root that you think might be a snake, you would much prefer think a root is a snake and be like surprised and then figure yourself out than think a snake is a root and then get bit and be out in the middle of the Amazon and be like, okay, now you're dead. Mm-hmm. So it's actually like a super good thing that we have this, like the reticular activating system. We're like continually kind of detecting whether there might be some type of threat around us. And we can also get overrun by that. And if you can incorporate inject your day with a little bit of play or a little bit of art or a little bit of music or a little bit of sensuality or physical contact or massage or, something like that with some people. It's probably one of the longest levers for health. I would propose. And if you can take that play outside and maybe pop your shirt off and, maybe pop your shoes off and maybe get around some trees and then maybe jump, do that near some water and maybe jump in a cold body of water, and then maybe jump into a sauna and talk about your feelings.
Yeah.
And just have somebody to like feel rapport with and feel like, wow, like you get me and I get you.
Yeah.
I'm not so alone. And like, loneliness is like I think it's like one of the gnarliest things that is affecting culture right now. And it's like pervasive, and you can, I can feel it because I experience that with myself on occasion. Even if there's people around, sometimes I'm kind of like, I feel a little like, just not quite totally at home in a way. And I think there's those are the layers that I think are probably the most important for health is relationships and people and being able to communicate the way that you feel and being able to feel understood in that. Like, I don't feel so alone.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of, gathering. I was telling you that we, kind of gather out here once a week with a group of men, and it's not a traditional men's group, but more a men's hang. And invariably there are times when we get into some deep stuff, generally it is time in the sauna where we're just connecting and we're sharing what's going on. And it could be some deep shit, or it could be what we did over the weekend, but it is that sharing, and it's very easy to get into that self-isolation. I know I find myself in it at times, and to pop out of it, I love these ideas of like, first of all, getting outside, playing. I used to, when I was back home, we have a basketball hoop. I would just go outside and play basketball for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not a great basketball player, but it was getting a little movement and having some fun. Even if I were doing it by myself, I mean, ideally my son's there, but if he's not, it's just kind of breaking the cycle of staying at the desk and working and just grinding through, an innumerable amount of tasks that they're always going to be there. Yep. And like, it's like, I've had the challenges of like prioritizing, getting in that kind of sucked into that vortex, and then being able to zoom out and say, I don't really need to do all these things. Why am I feeling called to this busyness right now?
And you end up, so there's a book called The Master and His Emissary by, I think, Daniel McGilchrist. That's how you say his name, I'm pretty sure. And it's about the way that the hemispheres of the brain operate. And the left hemisphere is more like, linear, quantitative, get her done. And the right is more like the creative, kind of like flowy side. And obviously there's, it's not as simple and binary as that. That's like the integration between the two and all that. But in that book, one of the things that he proposes is that naturally that more quantitative, linear, get her done side will consume the creative, flowy, expressive side. And I think similarly, naturally, like the way that every moment as we're having this conversation, or as a person's taking a walk, or thinking about whatever they're thinking about, they're actually grooving pathways of who they believe themselves to be. And so the direction that you are shunting blood into different aspects of your brain, or perhaps shunting blood away from your organs into the periphery because you're in like this sympathetic fight flight type state. So you need to get yourself the heck out of the room. That's actually, think of it as almost like the Grand Canyon. Think of like rivers forming different canals. Based off of where that water goes is how those valleys form. So where that, like, that's your body, like that's your circulatory system. And your consciousness and your mind and your perceived reality dictates actually where you are shunting and moving fluid throughout your body, and where you're innervating and where you're activating and where you're developing gray matter and all of the different things. So 100% of the time you are the architect of your mind, like your brain, and your architecture, like neurons go beyond the brain. You have a ton of neurons in the stomach, the enteric nervous system, like the gut brain connection. And really your whole body, it's like your brain. I would suggest your brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like your dermis, your skin is your brain, and your digestive system is your brain, and like it's all interconnected. And 80% of the nerve fibers from the vagus nerve, which innervates most of the guts and the organs and such, 80% of those nerve fibers are actually afferent, meaning they're going from the body up to the brain. So your brain actually, at least through the lens of like the directionality of the nerve fibers in the vagus, it's kind of like being bossed around by the guts, you could say. So if we're picking up all of this information from the body, and we kind of think of like the brain as being like, the governor of all the different things, but we're getting so much bottom up information as well, and a part of like the way that we're developing ourselves, if you are in a part of your house that you spend a lot of time, if there's a room that like, cool, I'm in that room all the time, you're probably going to put different, paintings up on the wall, and you're going to keep it organized, and you're going to keep it clean, and you're going to spray some, essential mists or whatever. And like you go into that room, you're like, wow, like this room is occupied. That it can be that same way with like, oh wow, you occupy your amygdala. you just live in your amygdala. Like you live in the fear center of yourself. And so you go into the amygdala space and you're like, damn, like you've got gray matter for days in here, because that's just, it's where you're pouring your circulations, where you're pouring your energy, and something like meditation has been shown to increase gray matter around the hippocampus and decrease gray matter around the amygdala, and do a lot of other really interesting things as well. But it's just a really fascinating thing to like sit back and reflect of like, I am designing who I think myself to be in every instance, and it's actually manifesting myself to who I am.
How do we send more positive signals from the gut to the brain? There's check in your box. You should have one.
Oh, I got one?
Yeah.
Oh man. That's fun.
All right. There you go.
Going in.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
How do we send, if we've got 80% going to the brain, what are some positive inputs that will...
Massage, physical touch. There's a book that I reference in my book, The Align Method. There's a whole chapter in The Align Method called, I think it's called like The Healing Powers of Touch. And I reference another book called Touch by a woman called Dr. Tiffany Field. And in that, one of the studies that she ran was with babies that are in incubators. And so they're like preemie babies. And she found that the babies that were touched or massaged for, I think it was 15 minutes a day, like it was 2 times for 15 minutes each day, they were able to grow. It was like 2x the amount that their body was able to grow, and the speed that they were able to actually get out of the incubator, just because they're getting this healing, safety-inducing sensation of physical contact, because your skin is your brain. Like you're receiving all that information, and it's a continuous loop saying to your brain / the rest of your body, like, all right, cool, we're safe, we're good. But if you're sitting alone, in a safety raft in the middle of the ocean, like you're rightfully terrified. And so if you're sitting alone in the middle of your house in kind of like this desolate, it gets even worse the bigger the house is. If you're going to be alone in a house, it's nice to be in like a cabin.
Yeah.
When you're in like a freaking like marble mansion with nobody to share it with, it's terrible in my experience.
Yeah.
Not that I own one, but I've like spent, decent amount of time in places like that, and like living at clients' houses and such, and coming back, and it's just like you can hear the echoes in the hallways, and it's just like, oh, I'm sad. Like this makes me sad. I want to share this with somebody, and so that the power of physical touch is one of the highest leverage tools you can possibly have to induce a sensation of safety, and it's supportive for digestion, based off of like that would be, I think, one of the main premises of what's happening with that. Like the babies feel safe, so suddenly they're not in a place of panic and sympathetic nervous response, and they go into parasympathetic response, and suddenly their physiology gets a signal that it's safe to repair, safe for muscles to grow, it's safe to digest. If you're a woman, it's safe to go through like your menstrual cycle in a proper way. It's safe to bring blood to the midsection because you're safe. If you chronically feel unsafe for all of the different potential reasons that you might chronically feel unsafe for probably longer than you even realize, your body is chronically at a low level, getting you ready to run out of the room. And if you're getting ready at a low run or to fight, and if that's what you're doing, you're preparing yourself, all throughout the day. Obviously, sleep and such is going to be disturbed. But just your ability to just naturally repair the systems within your enteric nervous system, within your guts and your brain and all the different places, it'll be stifled and limited dramatically. So get safe, and that's going to be a great tool for your nervous system to function better and send better information. And ways to get safe would be like physical contact would be a really good one.
Yeah. What does touch look like for you when you say touch is important? How do you do it on maybe a daily basis or?
Literally anything. Like massage or For people that don't have resources to like pay for a massage, having friends that you can hug and like mean it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's like, I mean, I've gone through iterations of that with myself where I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like sad, or I went through a breakup or something, or I feel like lonely, or I feel kind of, purposeless. I'm kind of like, oh, like I feel like the dinghy in the middle of the ocean kind of sensation, which is so absurdly common, I think, but it's kind of shameful to talk about in a way, because it means you're like losing in a way.
Sure.
So you want to put up the facade like you're winning all the time.
Yes.
So then you don't get help.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing my facade and you're doing your facade and we're both in our like persona space.
Yeah.
And then so it's like, that's another bit that I think maybe Rob Doss has. And it's like, I'll pretend I am who you think I am. If you pretend, I'll pretend you are who you think you are. If you pretend I am who I think I am.
Yeah.
And so that's the game that we're running. But underneath that, there's so many other more honest, beautiful, vulnerable layers. And one of which is like, at least statistically speaking, culture is really fucking lonely. And even if you yourself feel really good, you're also connected to the fabric of everything else. So just because you can step over the homeless person, with track marks on their leg, and you're like, cool, I'm pretty numb to that, it's still affecting you. Like that's still your mom and your sister and your best friend and, all of that. And so just because you think that you're numb to it, I don't buy that you're actually truly, it's not actually affecting you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you can be touched without physical touch. I think you can be touched with eye contact. You can be touched with just like someone like being amidst a compassionate witness. If someone's like, oh, cool. Like I actually am available to see you at a deeper level than even what you might think that you see yourself as, or you think people see you as. Like I actually, and there's no judgment. I'm not trying to see you.
Yeah.
I'm just with whatever it is. And I love all of it. And like anything that you want to bring up and anything that you want to share, I'm here for it. But no pressure.
Yeah.
That's like, it's like a touch.
Yeah, there's an openness there, and it doesn't need to be spoken when it's in the right company. It's just a witnessing, and there's look, I think we're in a community here where that's readily available, and like I said, I gather with the men here once a week, and I have other touches throughout the week. But like, I'm curious for you, are you part of any men's groups, or is it just regular kind of communing with people where you get this?
I've done men's groups. I think they're great. I haven't been consistent with one though. It'd probably be a good idea for me to be consistent with it. I think most of my like men's groups are like, most of my friendships are glued together through activity. And so I don't think I have that many friends that I don't do something with that's active. So almost all my friends, my consistent text message to a lot of different people is like pickle. Yeah. Pickle ? Like let's play pickleball, or let's go wake surf, or let's go to Barton Springs and let's like go swim and, or like spike ball ? Or train ? And so like, that's my bridge and glue for relationships. And so I think that's kind of, I think doing like challenging things together is something that is incredibly therapeutic. But no, I think being part of a consistent men's group would be probably really good for me. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've like tapped in to them, and it's always surprising how therapeutic it is. If you're with the right dudes.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like it's like a stew. Like you really need like the right ingredients. And it's kind of a blend of people that are like, I've heard a wise way to orient your relationships is having about 33% of the people ahead of you of like what you're trying to learn and what you're trying to grow into.
Yeah.
And then, 30-ish% of the people like, oh yeah, like we're like peers.
Yeah.
And then include another 30-ish% of people that you can kind of support and help. Because all of those roles are supportive to you in different ways.
Yeah.
And so finding that right blend of people in like a men's group. Sometimes I find the men's groups to be just like not the right like blend of dudes for me to like feel like, oh, cool. I want to like invest in being there every Thursday for the next 6 months or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good orientation to it. I've had a mixed bag with the men's groups. I've been, I was in one that was great for a while and then just kind of lost its way. And it's like, okay, it's time to step away, and got a lot of benefit from it. Met a lot of great guys, but it got to be almost like a little too performative at times, where some guys were.
Dude, I love performative vulnerability. That's the shit. You're like, vulnerability's trending on TikTok.
Yeah, dude.
We need to fucking get out there and we're gonna bust it here.
Yes.
I'm going in.
Yeah. It was a beautiful thing.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. But what are you wanting to create in the world? Like, what is, like, do you have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan where it's like, this is the vision for how I want to show up?
I think just more like refinement and simplicity of the things that I'm doing. I think for me, like that's the thing. I want, most of my life goes in these oscillations of things getting too complex and too big, and then I'm wanting to refine and simplify and go back to something. So it's like this like spiral thing that I think probably most people end up doing. But no, I don't have like a set. I mean, I've written out 5-year plans and 10-year plans and 20-year plans and all of that stuff. But there's not something, as you're asking this question, that I feel in like a very deep embodied way of like, this is the plan.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do.
So you have the book out, you have your 6-week course.
We're doing another course. Well, it won't be out by the time this goes out, but we're doing another course all around mechanics of breathing. And getting into like the anatomy and physiology of that. A lot of breathing that you'll see as far as like courses and programs and stuff. It's like breathing exercises without a lot around like the exercise aspect of it, or the mobility aspect of it, or like the alignment aspect of it. So that's something I'm really excited about. I've been like nerding out pretty severely for the last, 6 months to a year. Just consuming everything that I possibly can around breathing related content. And I went and did like my somatic breathwork certification thing. And I've been like very interested in that. But yeah, the 6-week Align Method online program, which is more around mobility and movement, that's the thing that's out presently. But breathing is kind of like the next frontier of something I'm really excited about.
When you say you're connecting it to actual movement, so how to breathe with movement patterns, like
how to orient your ribs and your respiratory diaphragm and your pelvic floor and your feet and the rest of your body in such a way that naturally breath is just significantly more efficient. So as long as if your intercostals are chronically inhibited or contracted, or your ribs aren't able to move, or your diaphragm's maybe inhibited, or your pelvis is tilted over to the side, and you actually have like twist and torque and tension in this space around this cylinder where you're taking in your air, it's going to be really hard to have access to like full breathing capacity. And so working with people, you can think of your torso kind of like a can of Coke, like a tin can.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is big dents in that can anywhere throughout the can, then when you load the can, it will easily collapse. Oh. So the can's not going to be very strong and durable. Mm-hmm. You can kind of think of your torso like that. And so you want the diaphragms throughout your body, diaphragm being like horizontal connective tissue. So you could consider like your plantar fascia a diaphragm, perhaps. You can consider the meniscus in your knee a diaphragm. You consider your pelvic floor a diaphragm. Consider your respiratory diaphragm a diaphragm, all the way up through the chain, up into the top of the head. Finding alignment and balance between those diaphragms in relationship to each other allows this natural buoyancy to the body to manifest. The fancy term is tensegrity of the body. It's like the kind of dynamic tensional networks of the body that allows the body to, like, your bones aren't actually connected to anything. It's almost like they're like floating in this fluid pocket. And your muscles, a similar thing. Like, they're all wrapped in fluid, and their ability to glide with each other is what makes your body be able to move efficiently and pain-free and not build up inflammation and all sorts of different issues. But if the body starts to get, you have maybe an injury or scar tissue or some type of like movement behavior or pattern that's causing contraction in some part, say your hip is chronically like tense, then that creates a density in that space. And then the rest of the body has to compensate in order to rebalance itself through that. So there's tension poured throughout the whole entire body to compensate for that ankle injury you had or hip injury you had or whatever it may be. And so if you can relieve the tensions throughout the body and create spaciousness and hydration throughout all of the connective tissue in the body through different techniques and lifestyle practices and things of the like, suddenly the body's able to breathe more efficiently, and suddenly all of the your nervous system and your digestive system and all the systems are able to just work with greater ease because there's not tension backing things up. That's kind of like a long roundabout way of explaining.
Sure. No, I'm trying to wrap my head around like how what's the kind of cadence of the course? How long is the course? Is it
the breathing course?
Another 6-week course or
no? It'll be a 1-month thing, but it's not out yet. So
what's it? How challenging was it to come up with the kind of the program, the syllabus for it?
For the breathing or
breathing?
So the breathing, what we did is create something that has kind of like chapters to it. So there's a chapter that's just understanding anatomy, physiology of respiration, breathing. So like pretty basic, like probably like high school kind of approach on that of like, what do you actually need to know to really understand the value of breathing? And then the next section is broken down into mechanics. So providing people with exercises and mobilizations. So going through and starting to work with the ribs and work with the diaphragm and work with the pelvic floor. And then exercises to start to actually like maintain the changes, that the soft tissue changes that you might make. So that's really the most effective way of doing body work or training is having a blend between working on the soft tissue to get it into healthy orientation. And then also you have to turn the lights on in the house. So you have to engage the body. So that oscillation or back and forth between, okay, now we're going to like exercise and create stability. Now we're going to actually, in these parts of the body, that's already too stable and like too rigid. We're going to soften that place. We're going to use a foam roller. We're going to use resistance bands. We're going to use myofascial release balls. We'll do some kind of like self massage stuff. And then after that, we're going to turn the muscles back on and go through a couple exercises. So that's a really valuable way to get like actually sustained changes in the body.
Yeah.
And then the next section is all about breathing less. So most people are over breathing for the most part. So like the average breath cadence for most people walking around is around like 20 breaths or so a minute. The ideal for like a really healthy, calm, chill nervous system would be around like 5 to 6 breaths, like 5.5 breaths per minute. So we're about 4x that on average. And then what ends up happening with that is if you're breathing a lot or like over breathing, then your body is getting the signal that you have this abundance of oxygen. And so what it needs to do is it needs to actually kind of temper the release of oxygen from the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. So it'll start to hold on to your oxygen. So it makes your red blood cells stingy with releasing oxygen. So now it sends a signal that you need more oxygen. So I need to breathe more. And so you go into this cycle, hyperventilation begets hyperventilation begets hyperventilation. And hyperventilation is going to be tied to anxiety. And it's going to be tied to maybe even making you feel crazy. And it's going to be tied to sleep disruption. And it's going to be tied to probably dependence on more stimulants to keep you up. And you're going to have this, and then you'd probably be a bit fidgety as well, because your respiratory rate ideally wants to match the way that you actually move your body. And so it doesn't feel that good to just be sitting, hanging out, breathing at a fast clip. Like if you're sitting and hanging out and you're also breathing slowly, there's a coherence there. And so if you're breathing fast because you actually are like having this subtle starvation for air because your hemoglobin is just wildly inefficient at actually releasing the oxygen that you've always had access to the muscles. It's like greedy. It's not going to do it. then you're going to start breathing a lot and your body's like, fuck, man, I'm like anxious. I want to move. So you can start to rework and retool that whole system just through actively, intentionally slowing your breathing down a little bit, or working on some breath holds, or, really simple things. Like if you look at most of the mantras that a person might sing, or, a lot of the different spiritual songs and, mantras and things of the sort, the rate that you would be breathing as you are reading those or singing those is around 5.5 breaths per minute, which is kind of an interesting thing when you see like an overlay of, religion actually being a foundation for health. So it's like religion of the body.
Wow.
So we do these practices, we get down on the ground and we prostrate ourselves and go through that. It's like, oh, you're also grounding yourself. You're also taking a moment of meditation. You're also bending your hips and your knees and your ankles. You're also putting your hands in an overhead position. So now you're like clearing the body.
Yeah.
You're clearing the waste. And it's couched in, religion or God, which there's, other aspects of that are really valuable. But I think it's pretty cool when you see these esoteric, 5,000-year-old practices or any of that. That's like, oh, wait, they're actually tuning their physiology is what they're doing with that, among other things.
Yeah.
There's also like the relationship to God and a higher power, which ultimately what that's going to do from like I think more of like a mechanical, pragmatic perspective, it's going to take you out of this self-isolated, desolate sensation of being the buoy out in the middle of the ocean, because now suddenly I am the ocean, and I have a regular ongoing practice of I'm not alone on the ocean. I am the ocean, and I am my enemy, and I am my dad, and I am this person that I'm in this fucking argument with, that I'm ready to choke this person because I can't stand them. And suddenly you have an ongoing, like Muslim religion, like 5 times a day of kind of like, hey, pull yourself back, connect to God, connect to everything. Okay, now relook at the person. Are you able to see God in the person? It's obviously easier said than done, but what's that doing to the distribution of blood and energy throughout the body? Before you're in that like amygdala hijack state, now through this religious practice, suddenly it's perfused and you've got some more executive function. It's back in the prefrontal cortex and you're like, okay, cool, sweet. I'm still a little pissed off, but physiologically I've changed to be more open to the world. And I've also circulated my lymphatic fluid, and I also got myself grounded, and I also like looked up towards the sun, and I, like all of the different things. And so, yeah, breathing is a big part of a lot of like the Eastern esoteric practices and yogas and, religious perspectives, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. As you're mentioning that, I think about Peyton and I do Kundalini once a week, and just think about all the different movements we do and how that does really invite circulation, but just
gliding all your connective tissues.
So much of the breath and the mantras are like kind of drawn out in a way that
long exhalations as well.
Yeah.
Exhalation is parasympathetic, inhalation is sympathetic. So you're doing that over and over again. Every time you exhale, you're slowing down your heart rate. Every time you inhale, you're increasing your heart rate a little bit. That's heart rate variability. And so if you want to tune your nervous system, a really simple way is to start to realize that your visual muscles and your respiratory muscles are directly tied into your autonomic state. And so if you are freaking out and you're about to go on stage, you're about to go on a date, you're doing a thing, you're just in your car, and you're like, I just feel anxious. A really great approach would be, cool, I'm going to extend my exhalation. Maybe I'll sing a mantra if you're into spiritual stuff. Maybe I'll just sing in general. Maybe I'll get a flute. Maybe I'll get a kazoo. Maybe I'll get a didgeridoo. Like play a didgeridoo for 2 minutes and tell me you don't feel way more calm afterwards. Very few people are actually play a didgeridoo, but the reason I say didgeridoo is because you're also humming, you're also vibrating. So now you're increasing your nitric oxide production by 16-fold is the suggestion for what humming does as far as increasing nitric oxide. So now suddenly you're more vascular, your libido is higher. You feel more because you're more well circulated. All of your cardiovascular tissue is more relaxed. Just because you played this instrument for a couple of minutes. So you always have access to that. It's just the more a person becomes stressed, the more likely they are to make choices that stress them out more. So you need to be able to have that like self-parenting mechanism of like, okay, young Cal, okay, young Aaron, like, I know you're getting a little worked up right now, but we have our tools.
Yeah.
All right, come with me. Let's just do the tools. Let's just breathe a little bit. Hey, why don't you relax your eyes a little bit? Let's just, hey, that game you like to do when you look up at the clouds and you like, try to become creative and thinking what they are.
Yeah.
Like, let's just do that game. Let's make a deal. Let's do the cloud game and let's extend our exhalation for a minute and then we'll talk about this.
Wow.
And you are literally augmenting your autonomic nervous system and the distribution of blood and literally the way you're producing yourself in that instant, in real time within seconds.
Wow. I just see all this and I think about the ways that I'm not doing this and just getting caught in the cycle. And it's so simple to...
You're doing pretty good though.
Yeah, I would say so.
From the outside looking in.
But there's plenty of opportunity to pause. I think that's the big thing. It's just like pause. And I mean, just a simple exercise of laying in the grass and looking at the clouds.
So good. So many variables. Grounding, you're also breathing in the chemicals from the plants, so that's going to be supportive for your immune system, among other things, probably just generally feeling safe. All the things we already mentioned, sunlight, like think of sunlight as actually a physical object. Like start to reorient sunlight into being more like the way that you perceive drinking a bowl of soup. Start reorienting your relationship to the free electron stuff, among there's probably other factors happening as well in the process of grounding, as like you're actually consuming matter because you are.
What's your cold plunge practice been?
I don't really have a practice. I'm not that consistent with every day at 2:00. I do the whatever. For me, it's very much like, what's the phrase when the skillet's hot, you cook, or when the iron's, what I'm saying? That one. Like there's moments throughout the day where the pan's hot and I'm like, okay, I want to take advantage of this.
Yeah.
Like I feel energy feels good. I don't necessarily always know when that's going to be.
Yeah.
I can force myself into things, but that usually just doesn't last. So for me personally, I have probably more of like a feminine kind of approach on training and cold plunging and saunaing and all that stuff. It's kind of more like, when does it feel good? And typically for me, when I do it, which is almost every day, I've cut back a little bit on making it be like 4 minutes at 32 degrees and like holding an iceberg in my hand.
Yeah.
I use it more. I lean more towards sauna, particularly post training, because it can stifle a little bit of that inflammation response. That's good for hypertrophy, like muscle gain. And so I still will do it after training. I'll more do cold plunge before training because it's really nice for the nervous system.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, your thoughts on that.
If you're in a cold plunge, so says present research and data, which research and data changes, and it's based off of a small subset of people that aren't you, and who knows where their mindset was at, where their breathing patterns were at, what they ate that day. Like it's great to be following the science, which has a whole new meaning as of the last 4 years. So it's kind of like, like it has a whole, like there's a reason that we have a new perspective in some way of what happens in your guts when you hear follow the science.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not new.
Yeah.
Science is based on a small subset largely a small set of 20 something white males in fucking West Virginia, or whatever college town where people are down to receive $45 to put electrodes onto their heads and run on a treadmill for a while. Like, it's not you.
Yeah.
And so if you get excessively boxed in by some story of somebody else that you have no relation to, based off on typically there's be some type of bias. You're trying to prove something. Usually you try to take that bias out as much as possible, but there's probably kind of something you're hoping for a result if you're going to invest however many thousands of dollars into this research. And then you also have to look at conducting like a legit scientific experiment and double blind, empirical, all the different things. Like, it's going to be a costly endeavor financially and from a time perspective and from a human perspective. Like, there's so much. So there's a lot of things that just haven't been that interesting to study that are incredibly high leverage tools that we can be utilizing. There just hasn't been that much reason to like invest, the church of science into those practices.
Yeah.
And so we know a lot about a little bit of things, I think. And the things that we know a lot about, it's also still based on anywhere from, 12 individuals to 5,000 individuals that aren't you. So I think that's like another like caveat. Anytime it's like, well, science says to do this. I think there's also just like, well, how does it feel for you? Particularly if you're a woman. I think a lot of science largely is based off of men, again, and like young men. And so that's another thing, like the whole concept of like all women should be cold plunging for 4 minutes a day and keto, probably not that smart.
Yeah.
But for a lot of dudes, probably a super good idea.
Yes. Yeah.
To oscillate in and out of.
Yeah. I've played around with cold plunge before training, and it has felt good. I have felt the nervous system turn on, and, I've also, kind of read the science about post-workout cold plunge is not great for hypertrophy. And for me, it was more of like, it's kind of hard to get in the cold plunge. So I'll take the benefits of like the resilience.
Yeah, you're fine.
Over the
calm down.
Hypertrophy. Yeah.
Just fucking calm down.
But I also got into the rhythm of going in every day, every morning, and I got really used to it. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and he said that some of the stuff he's heard is that it's actually really
like pro-aging.
It's really good to not get used to it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so if you just are able to drop in, the body's not having that kind of response of, I need to be centered. I need to drop in. This is really challenging. I'm doing hard stuff. And
you would just lower the temperature and increase the time that you're in there. With anything, it's like what you're inducing is a hermetic stress on the body, and hermetic stress would be variable depending upon what your body's actually able to manage. And so typically a general rule of thumb with anything, any aspect of life, I would say, including training, but training is like a great metaphor for it, is putting yourself into a place where you are just nudging against your boundaries in like every aspect of your life, but not like blasting any of them open. And every now and again, maybe blast a few open, see what happens. But hopefully you have like time and space to integrate that, and like rebuild the walls, or else you might get a little lost, and you see that with psychedelics. And it's like a very common thing where someone's like, suddenly it's like, oh no, like I am the Messiah. It's like, no, you blew some walls open. Like you're actually not in the kingdom anymore, and you need to like rebuild the ground. Or maybe there is a couple of Messiah. I mean, Jesus, and some of the prophets, maybe like they might have had that experience. So who knows? I'm not sure. But the hermetic principle, like you're looking to be able to push the boundaries within yourself. And that could be intellectually, that could be creatively, that could be cold plunge, that could be a deadlift or a squat or any type of weight you're moving. So you're pushing the boundaries for what is challenging to you. And you're just going a little bit beyond that. And sometimes maybe you go more, sometimes you need to go less. But if you're never pushing those boundaries, then you're not going to grow. If you're pushing those boundaries too much, then you're going to break. And so with the cold plunge, what your perfect cold plunge temperature and time frame will absolutely be different than everyone else in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just figuring out what that is for you and kind of augmenting that. So I think with just like nutrition, just like movement, just like everything, it's having the spaciousness to listen to what your physiology is actually saying, and not just what your ego is saying, or not just what maybe you think your physiology is saying, because you might be acting like way more of a bitch than you actually are.
Yeah.
And you might just be accustomed to being a bitch because you're afraid of everything.
Yes.
And it's like, well, you're really limiting yourself. Like you could be way more awesome.
Yeah.
You're just afraid to go outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So you actually need a little like kick in the ass.
Yeah.
You know, you need a like fatherly freaking, you know, physical like nudge into something.
Yeah.
And then you can realize like, oh my God, that felt like a wall was blown open, but it's actually because I've been imprisoned in this little corner of the room, and I didn't realize there was a whole ton of pavement right on the other side of that wall.
Yeah.
I've just been terrified of life since I was whatever age. And so maybe knocking that wall open is actually what you need. And it might feel terrifying, but the other side is like greater liberation and freedom. And then you might get to the other wall where it's like, no, actually there's just air and, you know, openness. And there isn't really any foundation on the other side of that wall.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to slowly push on that one and build the floor out peripherally from that point.
Is there any place in your life right now where you're feeling like that pushing against that wall?
Yeah, I think most ways. Probably one of the biggest ones for me is being more comfortable in relationship with myself without having like dependence on external factors like my girlfriend or work or growth or education or like something that's kind of like occupying my consciousness to feel okay. I think that there's like a lot. I think I'm pretty young in that way still, of having like a really like deep internal sense of like independence without attachment to the periphery. And so doing things like, you know, doing like the darkness retreat was like a good nudge for that, or doing Vipassana is a good nudge for that, or doing different types of ceremonies and such have been supportive in that way. I've been potentially going to do a vision quest where you like go out and you drink water. They give you like, I think like a gallon of water each day or something for like 4 days. It's a total like a 10-day process. And you have like integration time afterwards. And then before you're doing, you know, you're going and doing different like sweats and people are blessing you with feathers and whatnot. And then you go and fast just with like a yoga mat on the ground. And you just kind of sit in your box and hang out in the woods for 4 days and just drink water. I think that I'm due for more of that. I think I could use more of that. I'm pretty dependent on a lot of like external stimuli to feel okay. It's very like avoidant kind of behavior.
I get that. That resonates for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah. Dude, the darkness retreat. When did you do that? How long ago was that?
A year ago. Yeah.
Great experience.
Yeah, hard. I don't think I would do it again.
I've heard that. Some people are like, yeah, it was great and I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a really cool thing. I would do it. I think I would do it if it was like a part of a thing, you know, as a part of like a documentary, or as I was going to go there with somebody that I really, really super cared about. And the only possible way they would do it is if I like did it as well or something like that. Yeah. But I don't think I would just like seek it out myself again. But really supportive. It definitely like the effect that it had on me is I became significantly more emotional, like more access to emotion afterwards. Like I went and watched the movie Inside Out 2 a couple days ago, and I cried at the end when they're like just hugging some freaking crystal thing, and like the girl suddenly has access to feelings other than like self-limitation and doubt. And I'm just like, it's so beautiful.
No shit.
Like, I think that's like a post-darkness retreat effect.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thanks for making time today and coming out here. And it's great to get to meet Maggie. And
Oh yeah, she was
great to see you again. It's been way too long. So
yeah, when you keep doing it. If people, so the breathing program isn't out. When
will that be out, you think?
I don't want to set a date.
Okay.
It'll probably be like end of July, early August or so.
Yeah, this will release probably mid-July or so.
Okay. Yeah. So if people have interest in, so the 6-week program it's fantastic for if your interest is like a baseline of figuring out mobility and range of motion throughout the whole body, and then learning to train in such a way that more relates to like quote unquote human movement. So like walking, running, kicking, punching, throwing, like contralateral, moving rotationally on the transverse plane, all the different words, essentially just like moving more like a human, more like an athlete. That's, if people have interest, there's a free week trial for that. So you can get a movement assessment and then go through some, what I call fundamental self-care techniques, which are just valuable to have in general. And then you can cancel after that. If, you don't want to keep going, I think you'd probably be interested, but that's alignpodcast.com/AMP, Align Method Program. And yeah, if people have interest in that, that would be the place for that.
How else can people work with you? Or are those the kind of the two avenues right now, that and your podcast and obviously your book?
Yeah, I think probably the book and the podcast. And I do work with people, but it's usually like 1 or 2 people.
Yeah.
And it's like either like a longer commitment type thing. So I mean, folks could potentially reach out if that would be of interest. But we're not doing, I think the program would probably be like the best starting point. And actually we do have a space. If you go to alignpodcast.com, there is a space for, consults, so we actually do some like online consultation. But yeah, probably the best place would be the program to start. And then from there, that like opens up into other avenues.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then all that stuff will be in the show notes so people can reference it there.
Thanks.
Yeah. Great seeing you, brother.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
What a cool cosmic place we're in right now. This is insane. I'm like very, sensitive to, this sounds stupid, but shapes. And it's really cool that this place is just a bunch of fucking circles and triangles. Yeah. Makes me feel good.
Good.
Yeah. There's like a whole study around that, of the way that shapes and geometry and such affects people. If you just look like when you walk outside, you feel pretty good. And it's like a lot of different, organic shapes, as well as like sunlight, all that stuff. But when you're in a house, and it's just, you're just in a box.
Yeah.
It affects your nervous system. It affects my nervous system. I can't speak for anybody else, but I really appreciate being in a place like this. Like I actually, in my property in Bend, Oregon, I had a teepee, like a proper, legit, like I don't know how big it was, 20-foot teepee or something.
Yeah.
And I actually spent the whole summer and fall living in the teepee.
Really?
So I had the main house, but what I was doing, we were doing like renovation and stuff for it. And so as I was doing that on the main house, I was living in the teepee. And so I'd use like the fridge and the bathroom and everything from the inside. But I actually spent like, I think it was like 4 or 5 months or so living in a teepee. Best sleep ever. It was great.
Really?
And you wake up and you see like the spiral of all of the, the tree posts or whatever the term for that would be.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful. It's such a cool thing. But it really like affected, I don't know, I think it maybe affected dreams and stuff, but it just really affected the way that I felt. Yeah, it's something to pay attention to. Like when you walk into your environment, how does your environment make you feel? Because it makes you feel something, I promise. And does your environment, that's also a chapter in the Align Method book. And in the online program, I actually have a week all around environment, how to like align or optimize your environment. But just as like a suggestion, when you walk into your home or to your office or to your car or whatever, like just check in with how it makes you feel. Check in with what are the stories that you hear, inside your subconscious or inside your mind when you walk in. And does it induce a sensation of like, this is me? Or is it kind of induce a sensation of like numbing? Cause like, this isn't you.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Right. All right.
All right. That's a wrap.
Good times. Wrap it up.
Hell yeah.